Genesis chapter 12. God's call to Abram. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's home, and go to a land that I am going to show you. I will give you many descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse those who curse you. And through you I will bless all the nations." When Abram was 75 years old, he started out from Haran, as the Lord had told him to do, and Lot went with him. Abram took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the wealth and all the slaves they had acquired in Haran, and they started out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land until he came to the sacred tree of Moreh, the holy place at Shechem. At the time the Canaanites were still living in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, "This is the country that I am going to give to your descendants." Then Abram built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. After that, he moved on south to the hill country east of the city of Bethel and set up his camp between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There also he built an altar and worshipped the Lord. Then he moved on from place to place, going toward the southern part of Canaan. But there was a famine in Canaan, and it was so bad that Abram went farther south to Egypt to live there for a while. When he was about to cross the border into Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "You are a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will assume that you are my wife, and so they will kill me and let you live. Tell them that you are my sister. Then because of you, they will let me live and treat me well." When he crossed the border into Egypt, the Egyptians did see that his wife was beautiful. Some of the court officials saw her and told the king how beautiful she was. So she was taken to his palace. Because of her, the king treated Abram well and gave him flocks of sheep and goats, cattle, donkeys, slaves, and camels. But because the king had taken Sarai, the Lord sent terrible diseases on him and on the people of his palace. Then the king sent for Abram and asked him, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say that she was your sister and let me take her as my wife? Here is your wife. Take her and get out." The king gave orders to his men, so they took Abram and put him out of the country together with his wife and everything he owned. Genesis chapter 13. Abram and Lot separate. Abram went north out of Egypt to the southern part of Canaan with his wife and everything he owned, and Lot went with him. Abram was a very rich man, with sheep, goats, and cattle, as well as silver and gold. Then he left there and moved from place to place, going toward Bethel. He reached the place between Bethel and Ai, where he had camped before, and had built an altar. There he worshipped the Lord. Lot also had sheep, goats, and cattle, as well as his own family and servants. And so there was not enough pasture land for the two of them to stay together, because they had too many animals. So quarrels broke out between the men who took care of Abram's animals and those who took care of Lot's animals. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were still living in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "We are relatives, and your men and my men shouldn't be quarreling. So let's separate. Choose any part of the land you want. You go one way, and I'll go to the other." Lot looked around and saw that the whole Jordan Valley, all the way to Zoar, had plenty of water, like the garden of the Lord, or like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord had destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the whole Jordan Valley for himself and moved away toward the east. That is how the two men parted. Abram stayed in the land of Canaan, and Lot settled among the cities in the valley and camped near Sodom, whose people were wicked and sinned against the Lord. After Lot had left, the Lord said to Abram, "From where you are, look carefully in all directions. I am going to give you and your descendants all the land that you see, and it will be yours forever. I am going to give you so many descendants that no one will be able to count them all. It would be as easy to count all the specks of dust on earth. Now go and look over the whole land, because I am going to give it all to you." So Abram moved his camp and settled near the sacred trees of Mamre at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Genesis chapter 14. Abram rescues Lot. 4 kings, Amraphel of Babylonia, Arioch of Elazar, Chedorlaomer of Elam, and Tidal of Goyim, went to war against 5 other kings: Bera of Sodom, Birsha of Gomorrah, Shinab of Admah, Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela or Zoar. These 5 kings had formed an alliance and joined forces in Siddim Valley, which is now the Dead Sea. They had been under the control of Chedorlaomer for 12 years, but in the 13th year they had rebelled against him. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and his allies came with their armies and defeated the Rephaim of Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in the plain of Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the mountains of Edom, pursuing them as far as El-Paran on the edge of the desert. Then they turned around and came back to Kadesh, then known as En-Mishpat. They conquered all the land of Amalekites and defeated the Amorites who lived in Hazazon Tamar. Then the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela drew up their armies for battle in Siddim Valley and fought against the kings of Elam, Goyim, Babylonia, and Elazar, 5 kings against 4. The valley was full of tar and pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah tried to run away from the battle, they fell into the pits. But the other three kings escaped to the mountains. The four kings took everything in Sodom and Gomorrah, including the food, and went away. Lot, Abram's nephew, was living in Sodom, so they took him and all his possessions. But a man escaped and reported all this to Abram, the Hebrew, who was living near the sacred trees belonging to the Mamre, the Amorite. Mamre and his brothers Eshcol and Aner were Abram's allies. When Abram heard that his nephew had been captured, he called together all the fighting men in his camp, 318 in all, and pursued the four kings all the way to Dan. There he divided his men into groups, attacked the enemy by night, and defeated them. He chased them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus, and got back all the loot that had been taken. He also brought back his nephew Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other prisoners. When Abram came back from his victory over Chedorlaomer and the other kings, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in Shaveh Valley, also called King's Valley. And Melchizedek, who was king of Salem and also a priest of the Most High God, brought bread and wine to Abram, blessed him, and said, "May the Most High God, who made heaven and earth, bless Abram. May the Most High God, who gave you victory over your enemies, be praised." And Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the loot he had recovered. The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Keep the loot, but give me back all my people." Abram answered, "I solemnly swear before the Lord, the Most High God, maker of heaven and earth, that I will not keep anything of yours, not even a thread or a sandal strap. Then you can never say, 'I am the one who made Abram rich.' I will take nothing for myself. I will accept only what my men have used, but let my allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, take their share." Genesis chapter 15. God's covenant with Abram. After this, Abram had a vision and heard the Lord say to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I will shield you from danger and give you a great reward." But Abram answered, "Sovereign Lord, what good will your reward do me, since I have no children? My only heir is Eliezer of Damascus. You have given me no children, and one of my slaves will inherit my property." Then he heard the Lord speaking to him again, "This slave Eliezer will not inherit your property. Your own son will be your heir." The Lord took him outside and said, "Look at the sky and try to count the stars. You will have as many descendants as that." Abram put his trust in the Lord, and because of this, the Lord was pleased with him and accepted him. Then the Lord said to him, "I am the Lord who led you out of Ur in Babylonia to give you this land as your own." But Abram asked, "Sovereign Lord, how can I know that it will be mine?" He answered, "Bring me a cow, a goat, and a ram, each of them 3 years old, and a dove and a pigeon." Abram brought the animals to God, cut them in half, and placed the halves opposite each other in 2 rows. But he did not cut up the birds Vultures came down on the bodies, but Abram drove them off. When the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and fear and terror came over him. The Lord said to him, "Your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land. They will be slaves there and will be treated cruelly for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and when they leave that foreign land, they will take great wealth with them. You yourself will live to a ripe old age, die in peace, and be buried. It will be 4 generations before your descendants come back here, because I will not drive out the Amorites until they become so wicked that they must be punished." When the sun had set and it was dark, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch suddenly appeared and passed between the pieces of the animals. Then and there the Lord made a covenant with Abram. He said, "I promise to give your descendants all this land from the border of Egypt to the Euphrates River, including the lands of the Canaanites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." Genesis chapter 16. Hagar and Ishmael. Abram's wife Sarai had not borne him any children, but she had an Egyptian slave woman named Hagar. And so she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Why don't you sleep with my slave? Perhaps she can have a child for me." Abram agreed with what Sarai said, so she gave Hagar to him to be his concubine. This happened after Abram had lived in Canaan for 10 years. Abram had intercourse with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she found out that she was pregnant, she became proud and despised Sarai. Then Sarai said to Abram, "It's your fault that Hagar despises me. I myself gave her to you, and ever since she found out that she was pregnant, she has despised me. May the Lord judge which of us is right, you or me." Abram answered, "Very well, she is your slave and under your control. Do whatever you want with her." Then Sarai treated Hagar so cruelly that she ran away. The angel of the Lord met Hagar at a spring in the desert on the road to Shur and said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She answered, "I am running away from my mistress." He said, "Go back to her and be her slave." Then he said, "I will give you so many descendants that no one will be able to count them. You are going to have a son, and you will name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your cry of distress. But your son will live like a wild donkey. He will be against everyone, and everyone will be against him. He will live apart from all his relatives." Hagar asked herself, "Have I really seen God and lived to tell about it?" So she called the Lord, who had spoken to her, a God who sees. That is why people call the well between Kadesh and Bered the well of the living one who sees me. Hagar bore Abram a son, and he named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old at that time. Genesis chapter 17. Circumcision, the sign of the covenant. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the Almighty God. Obey me and always do what is right. I will make my covenant with you and give you many descendants. Abram bowed down with his face touching the ground, and God said, I make this covenant with you. I promise that you will be the ancestor of many nations. Your name will no longer be Abram, but Abraham, because I am making you the ancestor of many nations. I will give you many descendants, and some of them will be kings. You will have so many descendants that they will become nations. I will keep my promise to you and to your descendants in future generations as an everlasting covenant. I will be your God and the God of your descendants. I will give to you and to your descendants this land in which you are now a foreigner. The whole land of Canaan will belong to your descendants forever, and I will be their God. God said to Abram, You also must agree to keep the covenant with me, both you and your descendants in future generations. You and your descendants must all agree to circumcise every male among you. From now on, you must circumcise every baby boy when he is 8 days old, including slaves born in your homes and slaves bought from foreigners. This will show that there is a covenant between you and me. Each one must be circumcised, and this will be a physical sign to show that my covenant with you is everlasting. Any male who has not been circumcised will no longer be considered one of my people, because he has not kept the covenant with me. God said to Abraham, You must no longer call your wife Sarai. From now on, her name is Sarah. I will bless her, and I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she will become the mother of nations, and there will be kings among her descendants. Abram bowed down with his face touching the ground, but he began to laugh when he thought, Can a man have a child when he is 100 years old? Can Sarah have a child at 90? He asked God, Why not let Ishmael be my heir? But God said, No, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will name him Isaac. I will keep my covenant with him and with his descendants forever. It is an everlasting covenant. I have heard your request about Ishmael. So I will bless him and give him many children and many descendants. He will be the father of 12 princes, and I will make a great nation of his descendants. But I will keep my covenant with your son Isaac, who will be born to Sarah about this time next year. When God finished speaking to Abraham, he left him. On that same day, Abraham obeyed God and circumcised his son Ishmael and all the other males in his household, including the slaves born in his home and those he had bought. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13. They both They were both circumcised on the same day, together with all of Abraham's slaves. Genesis chapter 18. A son is promised to Abraham. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the sacred trees of Mamre. As Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent during the hottest part of the day, he looked up and saw 3 men standing there. As soon as he saw them, he ran out to meet them. Bowing down, with his face touching the ground, he said, "Sirs, please do not pass by my home without stopping. I am here to serve you. Let me bring some water for you to wash your feet. You can rest here beneath this tree. I will also bring a bit of food. It will give you strength to continue your journey. You've honored me by coming to my home, so let me serve you." They replied, "Thank you, we accept." Abraham hurried into the tent and said to Sarah, "Quick, take a sack of your best flour and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and picked out a calf that was tender and fat and gave it to a servant who hurried to get it ready. He took some cream, some milk, and the meat, and set the food before the men. There, under the tree, he served them himself, and they ate. Then they asked him, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" "She is there in the tent," he answered. One of them said, "9 months from now, I will come back, and your wife, Sarah, will have a son." Sarah was behind him at the door of the tent, listening. Abraham and Sarah were very old, and Sarah had stopped having her monthly periods. So Sarah laughed to herself and said, "Now that I am old and worn out, can I still enjoy sex? And besides, my husband is old too." Then the Lord asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Can I really have a child when I am so old? Is anything too hard for the Lord?' As I said, 9 months from now, I will return, and Sarah will have a son." Because Sarah was afraid, she denied it. "I didn't laugh," she said. "Yes, you did," he replied. "You laughed." Then the men left and went to a place where they could look down at Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on their way. And the Lord said to himself, "I will not hide from Abraham what I am going to do. His descendants will become a great and mighty nation, and through him I will bless all the nations. I have chosen him in order that he may command his sons and his descendants to obey me and to do what is right and just. If they do, I will do everything for him that I have promised." Then the Lord said to Abraham, "There are terrible accusations against Sodom and Gomorrah, and their sin is very great. I must go down to find out whether or not the accusations which I have heard are true." Then the 2 men left and went on towards Sodom. But the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached the Lord and asked, "Are you really going to destroy the innocent with the guilty? If there are 50 innocent people in the city, will you destroy the whole city? Won't you spare it in order to save the 50? Surely you won't kill the innocent with the guilty. That's impossible. You can't do that. If you did, the innocent would be punished along with the guilty. That is impossible. The judge of all the earth has to act justly." The Lord answered, "If I find 50 innocent people in Sodom, I will spare the whole city for the sake. Abraham spoke again. Please forgive my boldness in continuing to speak to you, Lord. I am only a man and have no right to say anything. But perhaps there will be only 45 innocent people instead of 50. Will you destroy the whole city because there are 5 too few? The Lord answered, I will not destroy the city if I find 45 innocent people. Abraham spoke again. Perhaps there will be only 40. He replied, I will not destroy it if there are 40. Abraham said, Please don't be angry, Lord, but I must speak again. What if there are only 30? He said, I will not do it if I find 30. Abraham said, Please forgive my boldness in continuing to speak to you, Lord. Suppose that only 20 are found. He said, I will not destroy the city if I find 20. Abraham said, Please don't be angry, Lord, and I will speak only once more. What if only 10 are found? He said, I will not destroy it if there are 10. After he had finished speaking with Abraham, the Lord went away and Abraham returned home. Genesis chapter 19. The sinfulness of Sodom. When the 2 angels came to Sodom that evening, Lot was sitting at the city's gate. As soon as he saw them, he got up and went to meet them. He bowed down before them and said, Sirs, I am here to serve you. Please come to my house. You can wash your feet and spend the night. In the morning, you can get up early and go on your way. But they answered, No, we will spend the night here in the city square. He kept on urging them, and finally they went with him to his house. Lot ordered his servants to bake some bread and prepare a fine meal for the guests. When it was ready, they ate it. Before the guests went to bed, the men of Sodom surrounded the house. All the men of the city, both young and old, were there. They called out to Lot and asked, Where are the men who came to stay with you tonight? Bring them out to us. The men of Sodom wanted to have sex with them. Lot went outside and closed the door behind him. He said to them, Friends, I beg you, don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who are still virgins. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want with them. But don't do anything to these men. They are guests in my house, and I must protect them. But they said, Get out of our way, you foreigner. Who are you to tell us what to do? Out of our way, or we will treat you worse than them. They pushed Lot back and moved up to break down the door. But the 2 men inside reached out, pulled Lot back into the house, and shut the door. Then they struck all the men outside with blindness, so that they couldn't find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, If you have anyone else here, sons, daughters, sons-in-law, or any other relatives living in the city, get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The Lord has heard the terrible accusations against these people and has sent us to destroy Sodom. Then Lot went to the men that his daughters were going to marry and said, Hurry up and get out of here. The Lord is going to destroy this place. But they thought he was joking. At dawn, the angels tried to make Lot hurry. Quick, they said. Take your wife and your 2 daughters and get out, so that you will not lose your lives when the city is destroyed." Lot hesitated. The Lord, however, had pity on him. So the man took him, his wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand, and led them out of the city. Then one of the angels said, "Run for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop in the valley. Run to the hills so that you won't be killed." But Lot answered, "No, please don't make us do that, sir. You have done me a great favor and saved my life. But the hills are too far away. The disaster will overtake me, and I will die before I get there. Do you see that little town? It is near enough. Let me go over there. You can see it is just a small place, and I will be safe." He answered, "All right, I agree. I won't destroy that town. Hurry, run. I can't do anything until you get there." Because Lot called it small, the town was named Zoar. The sun was rising when Lot reached Zoar. Suddenly the Lord rained burning sulfur on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and destroyed them and the whole valley, along with all the people there and everything that grew on the land. But Lot's wife looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood in the presence of the Lord. He looked down at Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole valley and saw smoke rising from the land like smoke from a huge furnace. But when God destroyed the city of the valley where Lot was living, he kept Abraham in mind and allowed Lot to escape to safety. Because Lot was afraid to stay in Zoar, he and his 2 daughters moved up into the hills and lived in a cave. The older daughter said to her sister, "Our father is getting old, and there are no men in the whole world to marry us so that we can have children. Come on, let's get our father drunk so that we can sleep with him and have children by him." That night, they gave him wine to drink, and the older daughter had intercourse with him. But he was so drunk that he didn't know it. The next day, the older daughter said to her sister, "I slept with him last night. Now let's get him drunk again tonight, and you sleep with him. Then each of us will have a child by our father." So that night they got him drunk, and the younger daughter had intercourse with him. Again he was so drunk that he didn't know it. In this way, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their own father. The older daughter had a son whom she named Moab. He was the ancestor of the present-day Moabites. The younger daughter also had a son whom she named Ben-ammi. He was the ancestor of the present-day Ammonites. This is chapter 20, Abraham and Abimelech. Abraham moved from Mamre to the southern part of Canaan and lived between Kadesh and Shur. Later, while he was living in Gerar, he said that his wife Sarah was his sister. So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. One night, God appeared to him in a dream and said, "You are going to die because you have taken this woman. She is already married." But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, I am innocent. Would you destroy me and my people?" Abraham himself said, that she was his sister, and she said the same thing. I did this with a clear conscience, and I have done no wrong. God replied in a dream, Yes, I know that you did it with a clear conscience. So I kept you from sinning against me and did not let you touch her. But now, give the woman back to her husband. He is a prophet, and he will pray for you, so that you will not die. But if you do not give her back, I warn you that you are going to die, you and all your people. Early the next morning, Abimelech called all his officials and told them what had happened, and they were terrified. Then Abimelech called Abraham and asked, What have you done to us? What wrong have I done to you to make you bring this disaster on me and my kingdom? No one should ever do what you have done to me. Why did you do it? Abraham answered, I thought there would be no one here who has reverence for God, and that they would kill me to get my wife. She really is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not of my mother, and I married her. So when God sent me from my father's house into foreign lands, I said to her, You can show how loyal you are to me by telling everyone that I am your brother. Then Abimelech gave Sarah back to Abraham, and at the same time he gave him sheep, cattle, and slaves. He said to Abraham, Here is my whole land. Live anywhere you like. He said to Sarah, I am giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver as proof to all who are with you that you are innocent. Everyone will know that you have done no wrong. Because of what had happened to Sarah, Abraham's wife, the Lord had made it impossible for any woman in Abimelech's palace to have children. So Abraham prayed for Abimelech, and God healed him. He also healed his wife and his slave women, so that they could have children.